about 12, so going on, I graduated 13. So I'm very familiar with the Raleigh area and I love it here. So, number one thing about for us, we're a cleaning business. We do residential and commercial cleanings. These are including move-in, move-outs, residential, reoccurring cleans. But I'm here with you guys to really establish more of a reliable contact for cleaning services. Not sure if you guys are familiar at all, but I get contacts from realtors all the time who tell me, hey, Kyle, we just need somebody who's reliable, who we can reach out to when we have a move-in, when we have a client who needs to increase their appeal of their home, right? So that's when we come in. So we're mostly online. All of our pricing is transparent. You can see all the pricing that we have. And I believe for realtors, we are also including a package for you guys where I would say anything around 2-bedroom, 3-bedrooms, they're going to all be standard pricing all the way up to like a 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom home. So it'll be real simple, easy for you guys to, whenever you need a cleaning, you know who to call. So that's basically it. I wish I had much more details about cleaning. Go ahead. What questions you guys have?
Do you have like a checklist, like if you come to my house and you say, hey, this is the checklist of what we clean, this is the price, are there add-ons? Or if I'm saying, you know what, I really, all my windowsills look bad, I want those cleaned, or like, how does that work as far as a custom cleaning versus what you guys have already set up as, you know, as a package price or whatever?
That's actually a really good question. So we do have a couple pre-packaged plans, so like our regular standard clean, deep clean, move in, move outs. Now, if you want an a la carte, let's say if you want to clean your oven, if you want your interior windows, you know, the seals cleaned as well, we do also add those on additional charge. And all of this can be accessed on our website. So if you go to freshstartprocleaners.com, you would be able to basically build out your whole cleaning quote with the price, pay the invoice there, or if you'd rather pay a different way, we can, you know, work that out as you want to as well. But it is a la carte to answer your question.
Do you do like carpet cleaning services too with that? Can you do that?
We don't do carpet cleaning services, so no shampooing of the carpets right now. I can, you know, you give me a call, we can try to find somebody who can get that done. Yeah, exactly. So,
Cool.
yeah, so we do work with a lot of subcontractors for different services as well. So if you need something pressure washed, you can also give us a call. We can work that out for you as well. All right. Any other questions? I know.
No,
It's exciting. Cleaning business is very exciting. I got Paneros. Well, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask how to reach you, but you just said it.
Perfect. All right.
Thank you.
Of course.
Awesome, Kyle, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
You got some cards you're gonna leave behind for us?
You want me to?
I'll leave out there by Panera and I'll make sure I put some in the rack for us too, though. We have the rack for it. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. It's a pleasure meeting everybody.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks for your time. Thanks.
All right. Justin is here. All right. All right, everybody. Exciting topic today. So we're going to talk about, I know we saw some of you guys here last week. We did listing consultations, and I said, you know what? It is a great time to just go ahead and jump into buyer consultations. So obviously the elephant in the room, the NAR settlement is going to change the way obviously buyers and buyer agents are working together, and obviously the way we are doing those buyer presentations, you know, buyer consultations. I'm not going to give you a script today or a presentation like Justin did last week. It's more going to be just kind of throwing ideas around. So when you all leave today, you can kind of have a basis or a strategy of how you want to craft your consultation. Because ultimately what's going to happen is we are going to have to just knock our buyers head over heels in love with us at the table at first, you know, our first meeting, because ultimately we know the new rule is going to be that before we can even open a door for a buyer, we're going to have to sit down with them, have them sign an agreement. That agreement's going to have some type of compensation involved. And, you know, obviously it's hard to convey value as a buyer agent up front. So that brings me to the question of now is how, you know, what value as an agent right now do I have to a buyer? or what value do you have to a buyer right now? And I'm asking you maybe from the perspective of a buyer. Like they're saying, okay, I need a buyer agent. What do you think their main, in their brain, the reason they think they need you for right now?
They've never done it before.
Okay.
Get in the door. Get in the door.
There you go. So right now, as a real estate agent, our main value is to open doors in the mind of a buyer. And that's the uphill battle that we're going to face when we are doing these consultations with compensation, because I mean, I don't, when all this unravels and everything gets settled, a buyer won't need an agent to open a door, just like they don't need an agent now to open a door. They can call the listing agent. But if I'm sitting across from a buyer and saying, hey, this is what you're agreed to paying me, and all in their mind, they're thinking that's a lot of money just to open a door. I'll just call the number on the sign, or I'll just go to open houses. So, it's going to be an uphill battle. We know right now, like I said, right, or as Cindy said, our value is a door opener, or to, find properties for them. And we also know that, I also tell my buyers, I'm not going to find you a property. More than likely, you're going to find your property because you're going to be online on Zillow, looking through properties, and you're going to send me stuff that you like. So with
I don't think the value isn't changing. We're still, is it just?
the perceived value, yeah, the value's there, and that's why we're doing this.
Stuff goes on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
with The buyer, and so it's just communicate. all the
Exactly.
Things that goes on.
Exactly. So that's a great segue, Colleen. Thank you. So right now, who has done a buyer consultation in the room before? So pretty much anybody. Zoom, you guys are not going to be quiet all day today. You guys can yell out if you want. Feel free to please participate. But obviously, pretty much everybody in the room's done a buyer consultation. What did that buyer consultation consist of?
Talking about what they want.
What they want.
What they're looking for, what they need.
Okay. What else?
What to expect from the process.
What to expect from the process?
My presentation is start to finish, how we're gonna buy them a house.
Okay. So basically, right now, our buyer consultations consist of Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what are y'all looking for in a house? And then we write down all that stuff. And then we say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is what we're going to go through once this process starts. This is how it's going to look like. And at that point in the conversation, I don't get too descriptive because, you start to get glazing over the eyes. You're talking about a lot of stuff that they maybe have never heard of before. And I always say, I'm going to tell you about the whole process now. And then as we're going through the process, I'll revisit each step and further explain it. I'll tell them the big overview. And then as we get closer to a step in the process, we'll go into more detail. Well, all that's going to change now because obviously we're going to have to go into higher detail when we are sitting across from them. We're going to have to go into more detail of, hey, this is inspections. This is what can happen during inspections. This is what, due diligence is. So in y'all's opinion, what do you see the buyer agency or a buyer agent looking like, 6 months from now, as far as, well, let me put some ideas in your head. Have you ever thought in your life as a real estate agent that you may be part of an interview process with multiple agents for buyer agency?
Yes. Yes.
Because I've never thought that. I know on the listing side it's competitive, but I've never really had competition, trying to secure a buyer on the buyer side. But now we're going to be facing, possibility of, oh yes, that's great. This is what you charge. This is what you're offering. I'm also going to be interviewing, 3 other buyer agents to see which one I could fit with. So, ultimately it's going to become almost like listing presentations because you're going to have to convey your value. There's going to be monetary consideration on the line that, is going to be interchangeable. It's going to be negotiable. There's not going to be a standard. And you don't know what these other agents are going to be sitting down saying, this is what I charge. And it could be more, it could be less than what you charge. That is kind of crazy to me, like I said, I've never had issues securing buyers because usually when a buyer calls you, it's pretty much, okay, you're going to work with me, I'm going to work with you. Obviously, we still have a consultation, obviously we go over all the paperwork. And a lot of the stuff in NAR settlement, we know is already in our paperwork. So that was stuff we already were having conversations about. So when I posed the question, where do you see buyer agency in 6 months, or what do you see the buyer agency model? A couple things that I've just really been, brainstorming about is kind of when you see a listing agent, when they're showing value, a lot of times their value is, I've sold so many houses in this one neighborhood, or I've sold so many houses in this specific area. I see buyer agency becoming hyper local. It's, one way that you can convey value is that an area like the back of your hand. And if, one of the talking points in your buyer consultation is going to be, oh, you're looking in, the Cleveland area or McGee's Crossroads area or in Smithfield or Fuquay or Willow Springs. Well, I'll have Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I've sold 25 houses in Willow Springs, or I've sold 25 houses in the McGee's Crossroads area. So I know this area like the back of my hand. I think that's going to become very, very valuable. Just as when you're on a listing appointment, you're telling, a seller, hey, I've sold this many houses at Adams Point. That's why you should use me. I'm the expert of Adams Point. So I think that it's going to become very, very local. I'm really about to blow y'all's mind with this next one. How about this? How about, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my fee is 2.4%. But let me tell you what that's going to include. That's going to pay for your home inspection. That's going to pay for your HVAC inspection. That's going to pay for your radon inspection. That's going to cover basically all your inspections.
That's appealing.
Would that not sound appealing to a buyer?
Yeah, but the agent is losing part of their money.
That's going to be the new, but that's
But that's if the seller is not paying commission.
exactly.
Right, so this is a bridge we'll have to cross, knowing good and well going into whether it's a driveway buyer consultation,
Mhm.
which Brian Danny's like, you gotta have those too,
Yeah.
those are important.
Yeah.
Or it's a sit down, is the seller paying is the first question.
Oh, yeah.
It's not even assuming anymore like it's
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, ultimately going back to that is ultimately going to be the very first question of our consultations coming is, can you pay me? Do you want to look at houses where you have the possibility of having to pay this amount, or do you just want to stick at looking houses that we know there's going to be a co-op commission? So if it is somebody that is going to be willing to pay me, what about, hey, I come as a package deal. I'll cover all your costs. Because there's going to be an agent out there that does it. Because, it's a way to entice a buyer.
We can offer that service as we grouping it all in.
Just
And
as,
we're paying the home inspector as like upfront, basically, and then getting reimbursed on the back end. And how does that look on a HUD? Like, what do we?
I just think it's going to be a business cost.
Yeah.
I run my credit card for a home inspection that I pay for, and then I'm getting the full cost on the back end. And then it's a business write-off at the end of the day. Nope.
Yeah, but if they don't go with it, and then you have.
What if, right, so what are we looking at then? And I'm out $900.
You see, by you saying that, it made me even think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And sometimes people put their mouth where their money is.
exactly.
And so the buyer has less skin in the game.
Exactly.
Now, that concerns me.
Exactly.
Now,
But, like I said-
say I'm willing to pay your time.
Yeah,
This amount, and close.
Yeah.
Because then it's not, if they don't close, then they're out that
Yeah.
money, because then a buyer could just walk.
exactly.
And the buyer agency agreement has to be filled out before we open a door for them.
Absolutely.
So.
So either you
that's
provide it or you
subject-
don't.
It's subject to change, so
Sure.
if they go to buy a house or look at a house and it's offering seller, to pay the other
Yeah.
side, the co-broke.
Because there are,
Then we can go back and revise the buyer agency agreement.
Yeah.
Wait, time out. So the buyer, you're saying the buyer agency needs to be filled out, but correct me if I'm wrong, EXP has come out with a one-page buyer broker.
Mhm.
So they only have to really fill out that one page, not the whole.
well, I don't know, because the real estate commission is going to have forms that they're going to be required to fill out. So, that's great, is that EXP is going to have a form, but at the end of the day, North Carolina Real Estate Commission is going to be the one that's in charge of what forms we're filling out and have to fill out. So, and like I said, totally playing devil's advocate with that idea, but don't tell me there's not listing agents that don't pay for power washing up front or bags of mulch to get put out or possibly carpets cleaned. They take the same risk because that seller could walk on.
Well, do we credit it close them that the agent off the roof is paying for that? They're offering.
Then they have skin in the game.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful, because if you do it for one.
Yeah.
But do it for everybody.
Exactly.
They're gonna tell their SOI and then. they're
Exactly.
gonna come to you and everyone's
They're
gonna
gonna
say,
say, how come you did it?
I'm
for
rolling out
Johnny?"
cash for every buyer that comes to talk to me.
I'm seeing, I guarantee there's gonna be a one-stop shop buyer agent out there somewhere. That is gonna be
Well,
like,
you're gonna be affiliated with Open Door, Zillow,
Yeah.
Mark Spain, exactly.
so.
But I think like if we show enough value, then
It
it's
doesn't
not
matter.
gonna be.
There's other ways of showing that.
Yeah, and that's what we're gonna get into here in a second, so don't worry. We got more. We got more. But yeah, isn't that scary though? Like I said, I mean, because ultimately there's some rules in place. Let's just review them real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said the real estate commission's gonna come out. I mentioned about EXP
Yeah.
has the buyer broker, and then you said the real estate commission's gonna come out with the whole things that they have to sign.
Yeah.
When is that coming out?
I believe it's September. Well, obviously we know the new docs always come out in July. But from what I've heard, the new rules are not gonna go into effect until September.
Yeah.
So in September, I'm expecting them to have a new buyer agency agreement already queued up and whatever day. Now, total side thing, because I've gotten this question before and I don't know the answer. I don't know what happens to all agency agreements in September when that rule passes. I don't know if everything's null and void and everybody has to fill out new agency agreements, new listing agreements and everything,
Like grandfather.
or they're grandfathered in. So I don't know that answer, but that's a whole mess.
And I thought North Carolina was exempt from some of these things because of how the documentation that we're already following, we're one of like, what, 6 states that actually have it like chunked out versus.
We're already doing it.
That's right.
12 states.
But there's gonna be verbiage, the verbiage is just gonna have to change a little bit on the documents.
Yeah, on the listing agreement.
The listing agreement, the whole part of buyer
Yeah,
compensation is
right.
coming out.
Yeah.
On the buyer agency agreement, the verbiage is just gonna have to change a little bit.
Like-
It's still there spelled out. It says that if the
It says now.
seller or the cooperating firm is not paying, then you have to pay. So,
Mhm.
but we all know that obviously there's gonna be a new document that comes out.
I just wanna say, I went to Jay Carr's, luncheon room with the general meeting yesterday. And David Class was the attorney there
Mhm.
talking about the NAR update, and he said August 17th is the date of implementation.
Okay,
And November 26th, they expect final approval.
okay. So it'll be a rolling couple weeks of all this going. And let's kind of review real quick. We do know, as you just brought up, a lot of this stuff was already in place. The one big thing is before opening any doors, we're gonna have to have an agreement in place. The other big thing is that compensation agreement is gonna stick. So that means that if you say, hey, I'll work with you, you're gonna pay me $1,000. We go find a house for sale that they're paying $10,000. You as a buyer agent are only still gonna be able to make $1,000 because the big hoopla of all this was that we were steering buyers to the houses with higher commissions. So that's what they think was happening.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question? What were those dates that you gave in August 26th and?
November.
August 17th was the date of implementation, and November 26th would be, they're expecting final approval.
Okay, thank you.
approval On the settlement.
So you're saying that if you send the buyer agency and you agree upon, you're gonna pay me $1,000. Then you find a house that they absolutely fall in love with, but they're doing cooperative agency
Mhm.
and they're gonna pay 2.4%.
Mhm.
You're not getting that 2.4%?
I thought you could go in.
Well, the attorney did say yesterday that you can amend that, but be careful, because I have a feeling North Carolina's gonna say you can't. But right now.
Well, the NAR right now is saying you can't.
Okay.
They're saying it sticks. Now,
Whatever the buyer agency agreement says, it's like, that's it. Like, you can't divorce it, you can't, it's like.
You can lower it. You can lower
Yeah.
it.
You can lower it, you can also have it.
So you have to.
Right, that's what I was
so playing devil's advocate with that, you could do 1 day buyer agency agreement. You could do 1 property buyer agency agreement.
He has a one
Yeah.
house, and
Yeah.
they're working on a 1 day, they're working on a 1 week, like. So that's gonna be your loophole.
Yeah, there'll be a loophole,
Not
yeah.
that marriage certificate that says, that's it, we're done.
Yeah.
Like, This is.
So can you
But it's like-
call, can you
Enough.
call the listing agent on the one property and ask before we do the one pager?
Yep.
Yeah.
You should, I mean, you should, probably is a good idea, or text her or whatever, him or what, I mean. just-
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, but do the one house, the one day, one week, whatever.
So
I'm writing one for every house I want to go see.
I like-
I know what we're writing.
let's talk about value. So how do you plan when you're sitting across from a buyer in the future of what are some of the things that you can do to portray value up front? Because we know, like I said earlier, it's gonna be difficult. Our value as a buyer agent is usually at the finish line. We're the hero, we're the, the person that got them there. They realized everything they had to go through to get there, that they didn't realize was gonna be a process up front. So, man, we're valuable at the end. How are we gonna portray that or convey that value? Let's say we get a Zillow lead, never met them before. It's not and not somebody that you have a personal relationship, not a friend, not a family member, just a stranger that you got off Zillow. They're sitting across the table from you. What are some things that you could talk about to portray some value? Or
It's the same. I really do. I think it's educating them. Obviously, you watch TV.
Yeah.
You don't live under a rock. So you understand what's going on.
Mhm.
So the only thing I'm doing different now is just diving further into
Okay.
that. But I don't think the person that shows up to meet them to turn the door, for them changes at all as far as that value. Like,
Gotcha.
I'm the person, this is why this is why I'm picking up the phone and Zillow. I'm on a mega icon team. We're top 4 in, the triangle for teams. You're just going into all the things that this is why we've connected.
Mhm.
This is one of the counties that I work. I know a lot about it. It doesn't change that part of who we are.
But then you said,
You wanna get
granular.
so there you go. That's what I was looking for.
I have a document, that my coaching program sent me, and it's, 90 things that I do for a buyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I give it to them.
I totally forgot to print that out today, but you could Google it. There's that 100 things, the 500 things, the 1,000 things that an agent do. So we're talking about educate is gonna be one way that we can convey value.
You roadmap them out. You give
Road-
them the guide.
And then obviously, as we're going through that, so let's start with, the process. You're digging into each one of those processes and basically telling horror stories, right? You're basically telling them, hey, this is what we're gonna go through and this is what can go wrong. I think throwing a lot of real estate terminology that they may not know.
Due diligence, you mean that type of thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's, you guys got what I'm trying to write. A little terminology that, start to confuse them. Well, what do you mean? What's a radon? I really,
In my more positive aspect but I'm gonna present like, I've got 5-star quality vendors in my phone right here.
Mhm.
That I can help you through the process.
I like that.
I start all of my buyer consults, before I even explain the process and how we work, I'm securing a relationship.
Right.
Mhm.
That doesn't change.
So,
you know?
like, yeah, we can talk about due diligence and radon, et cetera, but before we even get into that, this is me, this is how I operate, are we a good fit?
They still have to
Yes.
fall in love with us, even if they're gonna have to come out of pocket, it doesn't change. It does not change the way that I feel like I'm going to treat it. Other than educating them on what it is, but they still have to fall in love with me. If I'm gonna open my wallet and pay you, I gotta make sure that I absolutely freaking love you.
Yeah.
We're in a relationship business,
We
right?
are in a relationship, we are dating now, we know it's headed towards marriage, like boom, we know we got this, like. That's what I wanna make sure, especially, and then I'm gonna explain to them, hey, I've got lenders, we've got options. Seller credit, seller concessions, yada, 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 and you go down the whole thing, like, you stick with me, we're gonna have this whole process wrapped up, and it's gonna cost you no different than it would before this NAR
It's you.
settlement. Like, it just doesn't change.
I like it.
The more we let them think it's got us all frazzled, the more they're gonna be like, oh, God, no,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go find, this red door agent and just call it a day, and they're gonna get subpar service.
Yeah.
It doesn't change.
The other part of that too is the other half. when we're getting to know them, are they somebody who's been doing this for 5 years and never bought a house? Are they somebody who goes to agent to agent to agent? Do we want to, do we
Sure.
want?
Again, it doesn't change, you pick those out real quick, like, oh, okay, I'm the 15th agent, that it's gonna say, cool, yeah, I gotta go, like, I mean, it doesn't change. I don't think it does.
Is that happening a lot here? I'm sorry, I'm new here. I've been here.
No, not in
Because,
it happens, but I think the point that Keith is like, and I appreciate it, is buyers, it's now, it's being viewed differently, like a seller where I'm being interviewed. Whereas before, most people are so hungry to get in the house, I'm turning the key. I've never had somebody be like, yeah, no, we don't like you, we're not gonna work with you.
Yeah.
Even if we weren't gonna be best friends, if I knew what I was saying, boom, it was done. Like, I'm sticking with you. They usually meet the first agent.
right.
Like, or they work with the first agent they meet.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. I was
On the
like,
buy side, maybe not on the listing
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's gonna become something where,
Become different. I see what you're saying.
yeah, where we may have, like I said, four buyer agents
Right.
interviewing with the buyer, which blows my mind,
Yeah,
but.
that's crazy.
Maybe as a newer agent, I came in with a different perspective, but coming off of doing a different type of commission job, I always was like, you should go out and interview other agents,
Mhm.
but they didn't.
Yeah,
They were just like, no, you're great, I like this, we're vibing or whatever. I'm like, okay, great.
yeah,
But I always said, I don't know, maybe it's like one of those like red herrings where you're like, go, interview someone else, I don't care. And they just, I don't know, but I have always treated it like a.
And if they
like
are
an interview.
interviewing other agents, it's a financial issue every single time.
Yeah.
Know that, whether they have the money or they don't, what do they want to pull out of their pocket?
Yeah.
They want to get a quote, it's a defense, it's like, I wanna see 3, and I wanna see which, sometimes people don't care who the best in the business is.
Yeah.
They want the best price.
Right.
I have a question.
yes,
Keith, you had mentioned Zillow. the
yes.
Zillow lead. What is Zillow coming out? with? They're
Zillow's coming out with a free look.
a what?
It's a 7-day free look. I haven't read much about it because the one thread or the one post on Facebook that somebody asked about it, literally every single agent on there said it's not gonna work in my state because of the rules that are gonna be in place.
Right.
So Zillow's basically saying that because they're sending leads, they're gonna have the agent that receives this lead sign a 7-day free look, which goes against the locking in of the commission up front. And so,
What means it's free?
Yeah.
Free is free.
yeah, the agents are gonna sign it with the lead.
So maybe it's a 0 commission for 7 days.
Yeah, which that's an issue because if you have that signed and they buy a house, yeah.
It has no legal basis.
Yeah,
So,
It's kind of a good thing though, it's like,
Trying to drive people back because they know
Yeah.
who they're calling.
it's kind of like gonna work to our advantage in that respect. People will get tired, there's gonna be a shift, but people are gonna get tired of being burned, especially when they're ready to buy a house.
Mhm.
Like, they're gonna be like, huh, what? With the Zillow stuff, so I think
Yeah.
it's gonna work to our advantage.
yeah.
I do.
What are y'all's opinion on new construction going into this? I mean, obviously, I know that some of us,
We're gonna have big old signs in there that says.
Yeah.
Your agents, you're
Yeah.
welcome here, we're paying this.
yeah. Do you think there's gonna be builders that go the opposite route?
you're gonna go to flat fee.
And they're gonna get tired of their agents being, of their on sales site or on-site agents being so burnt out, working both ends. They're already burnt out a lot of, like, Caruso Homes is a prime example. They've got one agent out there and I mean, it's insane trying to get a hold of her because she's the only one out there and there's 50 homes right now being built in that neighborhood. They're not gonna stay. They're going back to general brokerage. They're not, most people aren't gonna stay and want to do that.
Yeah.
Forever.
It's gonna be rough.
So these builders, again, they're gonna get tired of being burned. They're gonna try it out to save some money. And then they're gonna realize this isn't how the wheel turns.
So, going back, we know obviously at the very beginning, and there was also I can't remember if it was Glover or one of the other, if it was Access or somebody that's affiliated with them. But they said that they just threw up in, Nextdoor, a poll saying, hey, I'm a local real estate agent. We got this stuff going on. Just wanted to kind of ask you all, if you were gonna be buying a house in the future, would you rather buy a house where you were gonna have to pay the buyer agent directly, or would you, want to buy a house where the you know, kind of the way it's going now, where the listing agent's gonna take care of the buyer agent. And I believe it was 81% to 19% that they'd be looking at houses where, you know, there's a co-op commission listed. So we know that's gonna be the first question out the gate, obviously. And I think that's really is what is going to, you know, if automatically, if they say, you know, we just want to look at houses where the listing agent is co-oping or whatever, or the seller's paying, I guess you can't even say that anymore. You have to say the seller is paying the buyer agent commission. A lot of this stuff that we're talking about kind of goes back to the way we were doing it now. But no, you're good. No, we're here to ask questions.
Okay, you have a buy, let's say you have a buyer, I can't afford to pay you, so I only wanna look
Mhm.
at houses that are doing the cooperative commission.
Correct.
Okay, but here we go, they're shopping on Zillow or Realtor.com and looking at for it. They're not gonna see who's paying, they're not gonna know that.
Well, this is my, actually,
But where are we going? They're gonna see this house, they fall in love with it, it meets all their criteria, all their needs, all their wants, they've been looking for 3-4 months, this is the house. But they're not paying a cooperative commission,
yeah,
okay? And they don't have the money to pay you, then what?
So
they're gonna go right to the listing agent.
you work it
But
out,
they have a contract.
work it out in their financing.
They can turn.
They can terminate the contract,
Yeah.
but you need to have it in there what your commission's gonna be, whether they pay it or somebody else pays it. So it's already in there.
Yeah.
And so they have a contract with you. They can break it, right? They can break it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
Do we think lenders might be coming in with some superhero solution where they'll be willing to finance?
I asked a couple and they don't anticipate that yet, but it may. I mean, they're financing it now. Are they not?
They are.
I mean, that's the argument I can make. Oh, man, she can be able to make it around.
Oh my God.
Whose test? Is that Brian's?
Yeah, I can just go in.
Can't watch.
I don't know. Where's my phone? But Colleen, there's just a bunch of unknowns and we're just. And that's what you're thinking, these masterminds.
Sorry about that. But going back, I mean, we're talking about going through, we're gonna be sitting here doing our consultation, we're going through the steps. Is there any other kind of strategies that y'all are considering to kind of show your value? One of the things I came up with was, and we kind of do this as an exercise, but if you're telling to a buyer, hey, if you were buying my house, so I'm sitting across from an agent, or I'm sitting across from a buyer saying, if you were, you know, I had my house listed, these are all the things that as an agent, if I was representing you, I would have to find out about the area. So for example, my house, there's railroad tracks to run behind it that you wouldn't know because they're in the woods. There's a parkway, a 4-lane parkway that is planned in the 20-year plan that's supposed to run right behind my house. I'm trying to think of what else. Planned retail shopping center a mile down the road. So what are some things in y'all's mind, if you're sitting, if somebody was looking at your house for sale right now, what are some material facts that, you know, you would want an agent, or, you know, you would uncover as an agent representing the buyer? Does that make sense? What are some things, if you were selling or if you were looking, you know?
Is this during the due diligence period?
No, I'm just saying, like,
Do that for every house.
no. I'm just trying to say, okay, I'm just trying to give an example of, if I'm sitting during my consultation,
Yeah.
I'm trying to use it as an example of why I'm valuable. And I'll say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Ball, for example, if you were buying a house in my neighborhood, you would want to know that there's railroad tracks that run behind it. You would want to know that they're putting a 4-lane road through the neighborhood in the next 20 years. You would want to know that there's a shopping center going down the street. Would that be fair to say? And that's how you begin to, so that's one of the things I've started to craft is I'm going to have to tell a personal story sort of, or a personal example of, you know, just for example, if you were looking at a house in my neighborhood, these are things that you would have to worry about that as an agent, because I know this area so well, I'm going to be able to warn you about those things. So you're not looking at a property that 540 may have, you know, would have run through 10 years ago.
Okay, but sometimes the buyer love you, the buyer would do everything to work with you, but they don't have the money to pay
Exactly.
you. So is there any way we can add that to concessions or discount on the offer?
Yeah.
That's a solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the seller doesn't, well, don't want it, but so concession or okay. or offer.
I think you're talking about trying to solidify that. for
Yeah,
everyone.
Yeah.
Right now, we're able to give them a freebie, right?
Yeah,
You know, you can get to know me, okay, at the end of the day, you like me, now we're gonna sign. Well,
Yeah.
You can't do that, so you're thinking of, what can we do on the upfront?
exactly,
side?
exactly.
And I think as agents, how many hats do we wear?
All of
100? Okay, so in our consultations, we need to have so many things in our back pocket. Because your personality is different than yours, and you're gonna want to hear different things.
Yeah,
And as I'm talking to you, I'm gonna figure out, okay, you want to know the process, so I need to have in my back pocket to be able to talk about that. You may just wanna know that I'm gonna call you back. Okay, so you just gotta figure out who you're working with and have something in your back pocket.
exactly.
To
So
stop talking.
how am I gonna, what do I need to throw at them to show them? that?
Right, to show your back.
So back to my question, if somebody's looking at a house in your neighborhood, what is something that a buyer would be mad about if they didn't know about up front?
Flood zone.
Flood zone.
Well, it's not true for my neighborhood, but if it's a private road that isn't gonna be
Correct.
affected. By the DOT.
Anything else?
Construction,
Construction?
Yeah, additional.
whether it's the streetway or. I have a client, we just bought a house, but there's like 5 acres that wrap around the back of the house that belong to another company. And we called them and they're like, well, we do plan on building on it in the future. So my buyers bought it, but they're like, oh, I guess we'll have to be okay with a new community going in next door, like.
Restrictions,
Restrictions? I mean,
these restrictions.
I just want to put my head through a wall for the next buyer that says, I want to live in a no HOA community because I want to do whatever I want with my land. But then when I tell them there's still restrictions and they tell me, no, there's not an HOA. Well, guess what? There is.
Yeah.
So restrictive covenant, that's a great example.
You don't really wanna be in the
Neighborhood. You got 17 mobile homes on their land next door and they're running like a.
That's a big one now. It's like.
They're all lit down.
The impervious.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into, this is what we're getting into, the terminology. There's a good terminology. You guys know impervious surface? You ever heard of that?
Impervious.
Yeah.
So impervious surfaces is basically each county or each municipality sets forth based on the area, how much you can build on a lot as far as how much ground can be covered. So that includes your footprint for your house, decks, patios, pools, sidewalks, driveways. And sometimes, and basically this is what a survey is good for. Most surveys will tell you how much impervious surface rights you have and how much is taken up already. But there was a big news story five-ish years ago, in Cary, somebody built I had to been $100,000 multi-level deck on this house, went to sell it, found out that they were over the impervious surface limits, had to tear down the deck before they could sell the house.
Wow.
Serious problem can also be a case of losing the earnest money.
For,
Based on a contractor told me that. Yeah, and the attorney also.
so what are some other things you guys can think about?
Where's the septic located? Because I wanna.
Yeah.
Yep. So you guys starting to get an idea now, kind of sitting down across from a buyer, some of the stuff you could talk about, you know, when they start to, and like I said, it's upfront, you're gonna know what way you have to go, because obviously, if they're saying we're only gonna look at houses where the seller is paying, then we don't have to go down this long road of, you know, convincing them that they have to, you know, that you're worth. But if it is a situation, you can start talking about, we're like, oh, I don't know, that's, you know, that's kind of expensive. What am I getting with this? And you can start talking, you know, talk about your experiences, talk about stuff you heard. And like I said, and it doesn't even have to be hypothetical, but, you know, I'm gonna use my own house as an example. You know, if you go in and buy a house in my neighborhood blind, the listing agent isn't gonna tell, well, actually, they're supposed to tell you, but they may not tell you, or may not know that this stuff is happening in this neighborhood. They may not know that the railway right behind the house. So just some talking points of, and like I said, using terminology, I think is strong, because you're using stuff that they maybe have never heard of, making them feel maybe that they're a little in over their head. But it's gonna be interesting. I know that it's gonna be very interesting. I think at the end of the day, we know that the listing agents are basically the ones that are gonna be riding the ship. Because they're gonna be the first ones that are having the conversations with the sellers. And why it is advantageous for them to offer a buyer agency commission. But like I said, there's gonna be people out there that don't do it. And, you know, for the ones that don't, and the ones we are working with, that we're gonna tell them, you know, let's take $300,000 house, that's, you know, close to $7,500 in commissions. That's a scary number to put in front of somebody that had already talked to a lender about a down payment, and then you're gonna turn around and talk about how much inspections are gonna cost. I mean, it's a scary, it's gonna be scary for buyers going forward. I think everybody can agree with that.
We might also see that some sellers don't agree to it initially, but when they sit on the market for a month or two or more,
Yeah.
then when they start to see
Yeah.
some changes on individual properties that didn't sell.
Yeah, yeah. What are some other ideas? You have any other ideas of how we can convey value that we haven't talked about?
I think you can also role play and script practice it of telling your buyers of strategies you have to get the seller to help compensate.
Yeah.
So, you know, that type of thing, you know, I'm gonna fight for you, I'm
Yeah.
gonna appreciate it, I'm gonna do
Yeah.
everything in my power to help you find a home, and because you don't have the cash, that the seller will.
Yeah, yeah.
They compensate.
And you can put that in for seller concessions, right?
Yep.
On the contract.
Yes.
That's where you put that.
Yeah, that's, you know, I don't know if it's gonna be. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't know. Because this is the thing. Right now, the way the FHA and USDA, and all the government-backed loans, except for VA, we'll talk about VA in a second, they are separating the two. Because they don't want a buyer to use up all their concessions that they could be getting from a seller on paying the buyer agent. So they're separating those two out. Does that make sense? So they're saying that the buyer can still get their limit for an FHA loan from the seller in concessions. In addition to that, can get additional concessions from the seller to cover does that make sense? Because they don't want it to be unfair to the buyer at that point. So I don't know how that's gonna look on a contract. I don't know if it's gonna be an agreement to compensation. I don't know if they're gonna have a separate, you know, it can't be a part of the contract, so I don't know. It may be an addendum. But I know that it's gonna be separated because I believe Tracy said that on the back end, when we go to close out these deals, just as we could put seller concessions in now, there'll be seller concessions, and then there'll be buyer agency compensation will be another box that you fill out so that goes on record. And that'll also be for the appraisers to know. So it's all gonna be on there. I don't know exactly how they're gonna have all the paperwork talking to each other. I think it's gonna be an addendum, though, because like I said, they said it can't be part of the offer to purchase contract, as it can't be part of the offer to purchase contract now, you know, compensation can. So,
Question.
yes,
Being how I've never done any of this before.
you're lucky. You're probably the luckiest one in the room because you don't have to change your ways. You're just learning how to do it one
Right,
way.
but one of the things that I'm not understanding is if I have to have a buyer's agreement where I'm saying they're agreeing to pay me this amount, and then we put in an offer and we have a concession in there. What happens if on the buyer's agreement, I have one thing, but the seller's concession isn't matching up to that?
Well, if it's above, you don't get the difference. I believe I read that it's possible for the buyer to get that as a concession. Don't hold that. But I think that they said, so if there's a $2,000 difference, that possibly the buyer can get that as a concession. I don't know if I misread that or if that's something that's gonna change. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
So you'd have to have it in there on the buyer's
Yes.
agreement that you're expecting this amount.
Yes.
And then the buyer basically is hoping that the seller will pull it as a
Correct.
concession. Otherwise, they might just have to.
Well, that's a part of it. It's all gonna be a part of the negotiation. Now, the funny part about this whole situation is this whole thing is because the public was being harmed and they want more clarity in all of the commissions and all this. And this is literally taking that and turning it into a backdoor negotiation between two agents because they're removing it from the whole process.
Right.
You know, so there is no clarity you know, except for in the very beginning stages when you're sitting with a buyer agent or, you know, a buyer and saying, hey, this is what we're looking for. But to your question, so say the compensation is $5,000 on our buyer agency agreement. and the seller's only giving 4,000, we could ask for another 1,000 as a concession, or the buyer's gonna have to come up with a difference.
But maybe it can't be written as.
Or we can just adjust.
Yeah, you could adjust, yeah, you could adjust.
You can lower.
Yeah,
but
yeah, you
cannot
can't hire,
raise.
yeah.
Okay.
I didn't hear what you said.
You could adjust it, you could lower your commission,
You can lower.
so to not make them come up with a difference.
Okay,
Yeah.
but what if they can't?
So the best thing would be to start off and say, I want 3%. And then if it ends up being a lower number where you want to be, then.
Just
So-
agree on
And you
the
can
rest.
estimate, yeah, but you can't imagine
But how many buyers are gonna sign that?
I mean, I think you would have to explain to them, look, this is just here precautionary. We can always make things work on our own. We can always amend this based on your need,
That
but.
takes a lot of trust, like you.
It does, but they gotta trust you a lot anyways from the beginning to work with you.
It muddies the whole process though, you know? Look, where it was clear cut before, it's like, oh, this is just, you know, it's-
So I'll say-
That's what we've always taken is 2.4%.
So,
Yeah, but if it was higher, you.
And I understand that, but I think that's the gamble that we're taking too, where you gotta write it at 2.5 then, but 3%, that's.
so I'll do this. I'm not from here, okay? So I'm from Atlanta. Well, I just came from Atlanta. I've been in real estate for 14 years, Atlanta and Virginia. But what I would do with my transactions, I would put in there that they had any transaction fees. Any transaction fees, any accounting fees that the brokers, like, I would put that in there. Now, and I would tell them in the meeting, if there's some chance that like finances become an issue, we can always adjust it.
Right.
So it's already set in the commission agreement, hey, I need you to pay all this stuff too, but they understand that we can go down based on, and they trust me to do that. So I don't know that it would be a big deal that you say, hey, I'm asking for 3%, but we can make an adjustment for that.
Here, it's an agreement between our agency, not us.
Yeah.
So if we have on there, then EXP or whoever your agency is expecting 3%, and then we put that down.
And you can always amend it.
I don't know that you can actually though, and here's why I say that, here.
Yeah.
And because I've been in that situation where I get most of my clients that are buyers under agency before we ever write an offer. And I preface it as like, listen, we're going out, we're looking, we've already met. Listen, we're gonna go look at 8 or 9, you may fall in love. I wanna know, boom, that we can write that offer and we're not having to do this back end paperwork. But standard, which I know is a word we're not saying anymore, is 2.4. Some builders in new construction offer 3. Some sellers off, like that house been sitting on the market 300 days, I'm like literally throwing anything at you. However, I've written it at 3% before, and I've had it kicked back in Sky Slope, and they've said absolutely not. Like you have to write it as 2.4, and I've been able, up until this point, until this NAR, to amend it to go up.
Okay,
Never to go, so
well, I'll say I only threw 3 out.
Yeah.
Because I'm from Atlanta. It's 3
Atlanta's
and
different,
3.
I'm
So
sure.
that's the only reason I mentioned 3, so I should have said.
Rare in these parts.
Okay.
It's usually only being paid by a builder in new construction, honestly, that I would say. So, and if then Sky Slope still will kick it back, because then they'll see the purchase agreement and they're like, wait, and they have a big problem with that.
To what goes down?
To even go down, you cannot get them to write at 3, and then you don't buy at 3, where you were intentionally looking to begin with, and then you have to go down. I've had it kicked back every time I've ever done it like that.
Well, I'll have to learn more. I'm not with a brokerage yet, so I just got the email, I'll get my license number, so I'll have to learn more, I guess, with whatever brokerage, because
Right.
you said Sky Slope, so I'm assuming that's particular to.
Yeah,
Software for the
Certain-
that's our DocuSign,
Yeah.
e-sign program.
Okay,
Well,
So- And I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
it's Lakira.
Lakira hung out with me last week at, I was a guest speaker, for April Blackwell. And, she said that, and this is just a little side funny story. We were talking, you should have saw her jaw drop when we started talking about non-refundable due diligence.
Oh, yeah.
They don't do that non-refundable stuff. And
I'm
so when
scared.
she said, what are you talking about? I said, oh yeah, it's non-refundable. She said, oh my. So-
I'm nervous
Yeah,
to write
so-
a contract until I learn.
So I'm glad you came back out to hang out with us. So yeah, that was amazing.
Just one point.
Yeah.
I would suggest, the way I speak to the buyers, because we have the agent's agreement here, and that, right? That we
Yeah.
need to explain it to them. I would suggest like that, once we don't know, because I always get paid what the seller offers, what is on the MLS, right? I never put in my agency agreement up to 3%. Only in 2 last transactions after I've heard that, well, you can do that.
Yeah.
But now I don't do it anymore because somebody on Skype will just stop me and
You
say,
can't
no,
do it.
you can't.
It has to
Okay,
be very
all right.
specific,
So-
and that started like 6-7 months ago when all
Yeah.
the NAR buzzed.
Oh.
So I used to do that. So that's the tricky part, because as for now, when you do the agent's agreement, you need to put a number there, an exact number. But the house that my client likes is 2.5 and not 3%. So I'm doing my as a 2.5 and see what house that is
Mhm.
gonna like, and then I go there and change
Yeah.
and get his initial.
Yeah.
Because as far for now, I adjust of whatever the seller pays.
Exactly.
So if they pay 2%, it's fine.
Yeah.
So my suggestion in this case, that we need to negotiate this leasing will be, and I don't know if it'll be a good thing. It's like, okay, so my commission is 2.5%. If the seller offer lower than this, I would adjust if it's not too low.
Mhm.
But it's too low, we need to have another conversation.
I got you.
Right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, And we have to remember that the settlement is coming from a lot of people that aren't in, I mean, obviously NAR is shaped the settlement, but overall, the people that are in charge of all this happening, they aren't in the business. So they're just saying all these things are gonna get put into place. And that was the first thing I really thought of was, okay, I have a buyer agency agreement with somebody that says I'm making X. And then I find a house that they like and I'm gonna make X amount more. Why can't I just fill out a new buyer agency agreement? It doesn't, so I don't know how they'll enforce
Can you
that.
make the agency agreement say this is adjustable depending upon?
But you can do it for 1 day. You can do it for one house. That's what I'm saying.
But then
It's
you
gonna be a
don't
whole
have
lot more work
security.
for us.
You don't have the security of the client. though, right?
Exactly.
But no, if the buyer's allowed to get out of the contract, can't you just say the buyer wanted out of the contract? And then later on that they changed their mind, so we wrote a new one?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly that's why I'm scratching my head about that. Now, I will say, the flip side of this, the flip side of this rule has me happy. Because let's think about it. How hard would it be to get somebody to agree to sign a $250 buyer agency agreement that I could just change later? That's where the spirit of the rule's coming from. They're trying to prevent a race to the bottom where people are just charging X amount of money to open doors and then change it later. So I understand why the rule is being put in place. I don't understand how they're going to enforce that for that simple reason where I could say, hey, you know what, I'll charge you $50 a door. And then when we find out what house you're going to buy, we'll write another buyer agency agreement. I don't know how they'll enforce that, but that's what I'm worried about. But that's why they put that rule in place, is because they were trying to prevent, well, I'll just offer free services until, because obviously it's gonna be a whole heck of a lot easier to get a buyer up front to sign a free agreement. And then as you're showing them houses, them realize that they actually need you and they'll sign into, that makes sense. Because like I said, we gain our value, conveying that value as we work with that buyer, because we're taking them boots on the ground, showing them houses, pointing out defects, reminding them of stuff around the area, stuff like that. So that's where you get that snowball effect of value when you're working with the buyer. So I love the fact that the rule exists. I just don't know, as we're all sitting here with all these workarounds, know how exactly it's gonna, how it's gonna work.
I would love to see a pamphlet or even a sheet of something easy for the buyer to understand why we are doing this.
Yeah.
So we can present it the offer and say, hey, this is what we're doing after 30 years being negotiated, being showing houses until we find one we love, and then we have an agency agreement signed. We need to do this prior to show a house. I would love to see something easier for us, because it's not to be easy. Like, I've been rehearsing speaking to seller and buyer since this happened. So easy to explain to the seller. If you don't offer the compensation, you're gonna lower your power. You won't have as much power to
Yeah, your
sell your
exposure is
property.
gonna be lowered, yeah.
Your exposure gonna be lower because the only people that can afford their agent gonna show you your house.
Yeah.
But if not, if you offer some compensation, like we've been doing for all these years, you're gonna nothing would change for you. You're gonna be, more successful in your transaction. So easier. So tell me about the buyer. We need to go around the mountain 40 years to get there.
Pretty much. So I guess circling back around, I hope you guys picked up some tidbits and some ideas to kind of craft your new buyer consultation. We know that we're gonna have to go more in depth. The days of just scanning over the process are probably gonna be gone with some of our buyers at least. But we're really gonna have to dig in, go through the process, go through steps of the processes, go through stuff that can go wrong. Use examples from your own house or other buyers or sellers that you've had. And just, it's gonna be more of a sit down than we're probably used to. And I think that's gonna be one of the big things that as buyer agents, we're really gonna have to pump the brakes, where it seemed all so quickly when you get a phone call from a Zillow lead or get a call from a lead, you seem like you're almost at the house 2 hours later. And if it's a great day, you're writing an offer 4 hours later, and it's bang, 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 bang. And unfortunately, we're gonna kind of have to pump the brakes on that, where we're gonna have to have maybe an hour consultation with a buyer before working with them. And, go through the process really detailed and, put them to sleep almost, so to speak, but, make sure we're sprinkling in reasons that we are valuable, stuff that can go wrong, material facts about the area.
I think the biggest way we help each other out is the listing agent really pushes
Yeah.
the importance.
Yeah.
Like, that's gonna be the best way that we look out for each other, because your seller is gonna be on the buy side.
And you just took the words right out of my mouth. As an
So-
objection handler for a seller not trying to pay a buyer agency agreement, are you gonna buy a house after this? Yeah. Are you gonna pay your buyer agent, or are you gonna want the seller of that house to pay your buyer agent? And he's gonna be like,
So if we all try to.
that's a good question.
Keep it fair and like, just look out for each other, like, that'll be the best way to try to mitigate this new rule as if it never happened.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, the good news about it, and my main objection handler, is that obviously we know, and you being new to the state, did Georgia have a lot of the same stuff that they're talking about already in place, or did they have buyer agency agreements required?
Yeah, so
Okay.
before you open a door, you should have one. I mean, most people would like it.
Yeah,
would-
verbal, yeah.
Yeah, like,
And that's how we operated here. You could have verbal by agency, but I think, what I'm using is kind of laughing it off with my clients and saying, well, a lot of the rules that they're trying to implement nationwide have already been in, rules in North Carolina. So it just goes to show you how crazy wild, wild west a lot of these states were operating with, no buyer agency agreements or agreements of compensation. Luckily, we've already had all that groundwork laid out for years. So, when they say, well, I heard everything's changing. Well, actually, no, on the buyer agency.
not for here.
Yeah, on the buyer agency agreement, it already had this verbiage that says the seller or the buyer would be paying the commission. The only thing that's really going to change is on the listing agreement, that, whole mention of a buyer agent co-op commission is going away.
The standard there was like the listing agent was paying the commission. It was typically 3 to each side. The listing agent could negotiate for 7 and they take 4 and give the buyer 3.
Yeah.
I always put in my contract, let's say the seller is only paying 2 or 2.4, then you're responsible to give me the other 0.6
Yeah.
or 1. And, we could work it out based on whatever their circumstances were. But that was just always a part of my contracts and special steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, that's kind of what I'm using now as an objection handler, or kind of to soften that conversation of, and not much is changing in North Carolina. We already had all these rules in place, luckily, and it's going to be business as usual. So.
So, a question, I'm sorry, the person who's just talking, so you had buyers pay the difference?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they want the house, they trust me as an agent, and they typically feel like you deserve to get your pay, right? And if they want a house that isn't gonna pay it, then,
That's great.
they feel like you deserve to get what you pay. And, you add value. And of course, like, I have gotten like a lot of my buyers' money back at closing, where they're walking away with a check too. I've done a lot of VA loans, so it's easier to get them like checks walking away.
We didn't even discuss that.
As far as, and it's still every time I talk to a lender, I ask them for an update, and VA is dug in their heels.
Last night they changed.
Oh, did they finally change?
Like right before 5 p.m. yesterday, VA changed the rules.
So
They
that,
changed the rules that the sellers can pay for a buyer's agent. Yep.
or no, the buyers can pay for a buyer.
Yeah.
Because the rule was the buyer was not allowed to pay any
Yeah.
fees.
Yeah.
So they changed the rule. Okay, well, that's,
VA's changed the rule.
Wait,
Like,
wait,
at like
so
4:55
buyers
yesterday.
couldn't pay any fees?
fees, correct.
Yes.
A VA for VA. So the big hang up that I always got in fights with about that, and I know we're kind of getting off subject, but we also are out of time, was that I've had sellers that were like, I'm not paying the $100 pest inspection.
Wait, are these required?
Yes.
Pest inspection required by VA,
Okay,
and the seller would have to pay it because
Someone other. than-
you mentioned HVAC, radon, and some other things. Are those required here? Are home inspections required? Okay,
No.
okay.
But best inspection is.
for VA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Letters also, letters.
some do, yeah.
Ask for that.
Well, I appreciate everybody hanging out. Any questions?
No, but I am looking for commercial realtors if anyone knows any.
We got Brian up front. We'll introduce you to him.
Okay, cool.
Any, I need a different word than aha. Any ahas from anybody? Did we learn anything today? Did we come away with anything?
I do think that, you know, you guys gave me a lot of helpful ways to solidify my list of adding value.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody
We need to have more mouth lines.
Oh, yeah.
So we can share what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's for sure. We need that.
Thank you all on Zoom for hanging out. I hope y'all took away some good tidbits, and we will see you guys next Wednesday. Oh, also, everybody, real quick, CE hours. We're 19 days away. If you do not have your 4-hour gen up pickup or your 4-hour elective,
Wait, is this the same for everybody every year?
but you don't have to worry about it because did you have your North Carolina license yet?
So I just got an email that I'll have my license number. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do. There's something where you have to take the test. I didn't take the test here. So then I think it was said that you have to do like 90 hours.
There's post licensing, yeah.
Okay, so how do I complete that?
I'll talk to you about that.
It's next week.
We're gonna,
Next week is April's actually teaching next week. I don't know what she's teaching. She's changed on me like 2 or 3 times, so I'm actually the god. My sister's getting married.
I have a lender that has. Housing, got a person, I want to send.
Yeah, please do. Please. Oh, sorry. So anyways, we do have a virtual elective on Friday, 1 to 5. I added a couple more gen ups and electives to the calendar. TheRealSchoolNC.com is our website. I hope to see you all in class.
Question. Do you have more of this training coming up?
Yeah.